Welcome to Mystery Universe. Remember to support our channel, please subscribe. Archaeologists can spend months or even years sifting through tons of soil, carefully recording everything they find, from size, shape and color to exact position in the ground. Months of hard labor can lead to rare finds, but more often than not, they find nothing. Just imagine how annoyed archaeologists get when all their efforts come to nothing. Especially when some child in France falls into a hole and discovers the Laskos cave with rock paintings. It is an undeniable fact of life as an archaeologist that great finds sometimes happen unexpectedly, often stumbled upon by people who were not looking for anything of the sort. These are the people I'm going to tell you about. Terracotta Warriors. In 1974, a Chinese farmer turned his plot of pomegranate and persimmon trees into a tourist attraction from all over the world in an instant. While digging a well, he discovered 3 of more than 7,000 life-sized terracotta warriors. As it turned out, they were guarding the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. The terracotta army buried with the emperor is considered one of the greatest archaeological finds of all time. Not only are they perfectly preserved, but each of the 7,000 warriors has a unique appearance. Face, beard, weapons and armor are virtually unrepeatable. This curious fact has led some researchers to speculate that craftsmen created each warrior from a living person, perhaps even from actual soldiers in Qin Shi Huangdi's army. The warriors were probably intended to protect the emperor in the afterlife. In addition, support staff such as servants, scribes and cooks were also found there, suggesting that the emperor hoped to make his afterlife more or less the same as the real world. Qin Shi Huangdi probably didn't expect crowds of tourists to roam there hundreds of years later, but hopefully it didn't affect his happy afterlife. The Rosetta Stone. Egyptian hieroglyphics were a form of writing worthy of the tombs of kings and the walls of temples. Then, when Christianity began to grow in popularity, zealous of all forms of paganism, hieroglyphics were eventually banned and replaced by the much less impressive Coptic alphabet, which was basically Greek with other additional symbols. Like most traditions and languages that were too pagan to allow their existence, hieroglyphics died with the last handful of people who could read and write them about 1,500 years ago. This left future archaeologists puzzled for years. After all, ancient Egypt had a rich written language, but no one could figure out how to read it. In 1799, one of the soldiers of Napoleon's army, quite by accident, discovered an unusual piece of stone embedded in the wall of Fort Julian in the Egyptian city of Rosetta. Apparently, the fort's builders needed all the stones they could find, including a fragment of granodiorite, an igneous rock, which suited them just fine. As it was realized later, on the front side of the Rosetta Stone is a story about the Egyptian ruler, or to be more precise, about how cool he is. And it was written in 3 different languages: Egyptian hieroglyphics, Egyptian Demotic and Greek. This is what helped to unravel many of the Egyptian hieroglyphics, as people still knew how to read Greek. Finds in bogs. Peat Boggs are something between Dagobah, the swampy land from Star Wars, and a 2,000-year-old cake made of hundreds of layers of dead plants. The peat moss ages, gets wet, and then goes under ever-growing new layers of sphagnum until it forms a mass of organic matter over 3 meters thick, through which neither light, oxygen, nor Luke Skywalker's Gile powers can penetrate. It should not be forgotten that peat bogs in ancient times were apparently a convenient place to store various things, including swords, oil, and treasure. Peat miners often turn up unexpected finds, such as a man from Grobel, who was initially mistaken for another worker who had gone missing 65 years earlier. Radiocarbon analysis later proved that this man wasn't just a bloke who fell into the bog and drowned. He was left there over 2,000 years ago by those who sacrificed him, and we'll probably never know exactly who did it. Other chance finds on Peat Boggs include a perfectly preserved 14th century long sword spotted by a bloke working on an excavator. Just imagine the chagrin of this medieval knight as he watched his trusty weapon slip away beneath the surface of the mire. There were also a few finds of edible oil. Yes, edible oil, which could theoretically be used to bake a layer cake. But hopefully no one tried it. It is a museum piece after all. Victims of the eruption in Pompeii. When the volcano Vesuvius said to the people of Pompeii, "Hey, I'm going to explode in a couple of days, you better get out of here." Most reasoned that they should save themselves, but as with other cases of almost scientifically irrefutable warnings of imminent doom, there were some people who decided that it wouldn't really be that bad and decided to stay home. Oh, in vain. A couple of thousand years later, workers digging up the ruined city noticed that they were finding a lot of skeletons in strange hollows in the ground. It occurred to some that the dirt and ash from the erupting volcano might have hardened around the victims, perhaps preserving the shape of their bodies in their final moments. The hunch proved correct. As workers poured plaster into the recesses, they recreated the ghostly three-dimensional forms of the dead people, many of whom were clearly squirming in pain or screaming, as they were covered in red-hot lava, mud and ash. It was something like the world's first 3D printer, only much more horrifying. 40 ancient ships at the bottom of the Black Sea. Imagine you've been tasked with taking a boat out and exploring the water levels of the sea. It sounds about as exciting as getting paid to watch a kettle of water boil 40 or 50 times a day, but you end up discovering a shipwreck. Then you find another shipwreck, so your job doesn't get so boring anymore. This is exactly what happened when the Black Sea Archaeological Project tried to find out how fast the water level in the Black Sea was rising about 20,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. While mapping the underwater landscape, the researchers accidentally came across an entire graveyard of ships, more than 40 of them. The wreckage was in the region of 1,000 years old, yet it was remarkably well preserved. The team photographed the wrecks and then used the images to create three-dimensional models, many of which were unprecedented structures. The project's principal investigator called the discovery of the ships an unexpected bonus, as if they had won the lottery without even counting on it. Rock paintings in Laskos cave. One of the most famous accidental discoveries of all time occurred when 4 boys and a dog named Robot went for a walk one day. They soon came across a fallen tree that had blown a small hole in the ground. Robot, being a dog, said, "Damn that hole," and started digging it out. The 4 boys joined him, hoping they had found a secret tunnel entrance that would lead them to the lost treasure. What they found was indeed a lost treasure, but not the kind you can put in your pocket and sell to an antique dealer for $29. Instead, they discovered a cave full of 20,000-year-old paintings made by a talented artist. The images were beautifully detailed, and some were huge, more than 3 or 5 meters long. The drawings in Laskos cave, made 15,000 to 18,000 years ago, are sometimes referred to as the Sistine Chapel of primitive painting. In 1948, a year after their discovery, Laskos was open to the public, but 15 years later someone finally realized that tourism was bad for the images. All the carbon dioxide exhaled by thousands of visitors, along with the dirt and dust they brought with their shoes, was actually damaging the paintings, so tours were stopped. Today, only a few people a year are allowed into the caves, and their actions are mostly limited to trying to prevent possible damage to these amazing but fragile works of art. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Mystery Universe. Thank you.